What if doing good was simple? That is the question that I'm asking today. Usually when we talk about global extreme poverty, what happens? We simply get overwhelmed by all the different scenarios that we face, right? And when we get overwhelmed, something bad really happens. We just ignore the various issues that are going on in our world. I believe we can do good and it can be simple. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details of extreme poverty, I just want to share with you my story and why this means so much to me. In 2007, I was invited by a local Zimbabwean leader to visit his country. I remember landing in Zimbabwe and spending 20 hours driving through the bush and getting to the capital city of Harare. As we got to the capital city, this local leader basically asked a simple question. He said, "Do you mind if we stop at this gas station? I want to check on some kids." Now, I don't know about you, but where I'm from, I don't exactly like stopping at gas stations, much less at 4 a.m. in the morning. So I'm like, should we do that, or should we just go to our final destination? But my Zimbabwean friend was adamant that we stop. And a few moments later, I realized why. We pulled up into this gas station that you see here, and what I saw absolutely horrified me. It was dozens upon dozens upon dozens of kids, ages 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. They were just sleeping on the cold asphalt. And I realized that these kids call this abandoned gas station home. And I didn't know what to do about that. I was immediately frustrated. And I remember getting out of the van, and I was immediately surrounded by a group of these kids. They began to pull on me and hug me, and one kid in particular grabbed me by the arm, and he held tight, and he made eye contact, and he basically said this: "Sir, thank you so much for visiting my country. I'm so sorry it's in the shape that it's in. I don't want to beg you for food, but I haven't had anything to eat in days. Is there anything I can do to work for you so I can get something to eat?" I looked this young boy in the eye, and this is how I responded. I told him no. We got back in the van, and we drove off, and this one moment changed everything for me. How could I just tell a starving child that there was no way that I could help him? I was a wreck. I remember a few days later, I returned home, and I was wrestling with this issue of what is extreme poverty? Why are so many people suffering on issues that seems as if we can solve them? And I spent a year and a half in deep research asking that question, trying to figure out how I could help and how I could make a difference. And we won't dig deep into what is extreme poverty, because I believe others have covered it so well, but let me just share with you one quick stat. Today, over 1.4 billion of our global neighbors are suffering because they earn less than $1.25 a day. That is simply not enough to survive on. The most basic necessities of life, they don't have access to. Many of them feed their kids every other day just to keep them alive. That is the issue that I think we should focus on. So as I began to study extreme poverty, the next question was this. I wanted to know if we can end it. Is it possible for us to end extreme poverty, or should we just be okay with it existing? Should I just ignore it because I don't know how to help? Is there something I can do or something you can do to make a difference? And so as I begin to do research, I begin to find out some really good news. And hopefully this is encouraging. But we're actually winning the war on poverty on many levels. I want to share 3 quick data points with you this morning. The first one is this. Child mortality rates have been cut in half in just the last 30 years, which means when we get up tomorrow morning, less than half the kids will die because of issues of extreme poverty in our world than 30 years ago. That is huge progress. Over 2 billion more people now have access to safe drinking water than just a few decades ago. And we've actually cut poverty, extreme poverty, in half, from 52% to 26% just from 1981 to 2005. And we're continuing to see positive trends in the midst of one of the worst global economies. So that is good news. But of course, we still have to face this one issue. How do we get from 26% to 0? And that is the question that I want to wrestle with today. Because the only way we can do that is if everyone gets involved and makes a difference. I don't know about you, but usually when people ask me to get involved, I don't really know how to. Or if I do get involved, I know what that means. They just want me to write a check. And that's not good enough. When I came back from Zimbabwe, I began to talk to all my friends, whoever had a breath I was talking to, right? Like, this is what I experienced. Did you know this was going on? Did you know that there's 150 million orphans in our world? These are issues I think we can help. So I have some good news also. And I realize this is that nobody actually hates orphans, right? I mean, and if you hate an orphan, you can't communicate it because then we'll all hate you, so no one's going to tell me they hate orphans. But there was an underlying issue that was deep. Most folks have compassion, and most folks wanted to help, but they just didn't know how. Or if they were helping, they didn't know if it was actually making a difference. And so I want to talk about 3 ways to unleash good. 3 ways where all of us can rally together and make a difference in the lives of those 1.4 billion people who are suffering in extreme poverty. The first thing we need to do is unleash creative fundraising. Now, I've been to multiple fundraisers before, and most folks who run charities like I do, they usually do this. They tell you a story, and then they say, this is how you get involved. And it was always write a check. And I love generosity. I really do. Hopefully we're all generous people. But you know, there's a lack of innovation with that concept. Because how many times can we ask people to write checks? And the underlying issue is when people know they're going to have to write a check, eventually they just begin to step back and say, I don't know how much I can do that. And so I believe that we need, in the new age of technology, we need to be creative on how we raise capital for these projects that can fight extreme poverty around the world. For instance, our friends at Charity Water were dealing with this issue a few years ago. And so they began to ask their donor base to not just write a check, why don't you just give up your birthday? If you just give up your birthday, because really most of us probably have enough, or we can give up our birthday a couple times in our life, and we could take the funds that were going to come to us as gifts and reallocate those funds to providing clean water for those who don't have access to clean water, which will then help fight extreme poverty in their community. A few months ago, I scratched my glasses. And I don't know about you, but if I don't have glasses, I'm basically a disaster, right? I mean, I have to have glasses. And so I immediately went online to warbyparker.com, and I purchased these glasses for a normal price, and a few days later they arrived in my mailbox, and as I knew these glasses were coming to me, someone in the developing country were also going to get access to a pair of glasses that they couldn't afford. A simple, powerful way to make a difference. I didn't do anything different. All I did was purchase glasses, but our friends at Warby Parker are doing good and making it simple for all of us. In my organization, we do this very creative thing called Garage Sale for Orphans. Garage Sale for Orphans, it's simple. We've asked people all over the world to throw garage sale parties and donate the proceeds of those garage sales to a direct impact project. We see this happening every single weekend now, and it's so beautiful. Over this summer, we've actually rescued 32 kids in Haiti who were being trafficked, all because people all over the world decided to throw a garage sale party and give to help rescue these kids who are suffering some of the worst scenarios in life. What if doing good is simple? Charities like mine need to give you better tools to get engaged so you can make an impact. And if they're not, then they're not doing a good job. The second thing we can do is unleash human capital. This is absolutely essential because the most brilliant people are not the folks leading the charities, it's the folks around the charities. Every one of us in this room, we have passions and skills and gifts. And guess what? We can use those gifts and passions to solve global problems that the world is facing. You have a talent. You have a knowledge set. You have a network. You have a resource that can absolutely solve global problems. So many times when charities ask you to help, here's what they do. They say, will you come volunteer in my office? Like lick stamps or send out a newsletter. But the problem with all of us is this. We don't have a lot of extra time, right? And so when we give up time, how do we access the best part of who we are so we can solve problems? My friend John, who's an entrepreneur, I asked John to come to Haiti with me and spend a few days. And when he went to Haiti, it was so exciting to see because John loves strategy and business. He can grow companies. He can solve problems. And so he just spent 4 or 5 days with Haitian entrepreneurs who don't want to spend their entire lives in a food line asking for handouts. They're desperate to create jobs and to create wealth and to create opportunity for their own communities. And so John just spends a few days working through business plans, creating pitch decks, helping them understand how business works. What if doing good was simple? Healthcare, job creation, education, advancements in technology, those problems will be solved by people like you who have the talent and the ability and the passion. And the third thing that we need to do to do good is to continue to unleash high-capacity local leaders. For many, many years, I would show up to these developing communities who were suffering from extreme poverty, and I would get really frustrated because I would see a bunch of outsiders leading the way. And I begin to wonder, how is that sustainable? If an outsider is leading the way in the community, that's not going to work long-term. So we begin to ask a deeper question. What if we had the local leaders be the leaders? What if we said, you are the most innovative force in this community? You understand the culture. You understand sustainability. You get up every single day and you'll fight for your community. And so we have folks like Gaetan, who is our partner in Haiti. Gaetan had rescued 30 orphans after the earthquake. And when I first met Gaetan and these orphans, they were on the edge of life. They have lost everything. They've lost family and homes and schools. And so we said, Gaetan, how do we help you help these kids? And he had a clear vision. He knew exactly what needed to happen. And we said, lead us. Lead us and we'll follow. Lead us and we'll help you. And just a few years later, these kids went from eating every other day just to stay alive to eating 3 meals a day. They went from drinking water that was destroying their body to having access to clean water. They went from not having any education to attending a school every single day where they can learn and they can become the hope of their communities in the future. It's all because we said, Gaetan, lead us. What if doing good is simple? That's what we mean by those things. It doesn't have to be as complex as we make it out to be. A few months ago, I was in Uganda, and our local partner in Uganda is this funny Ugandan guy, and we're at the dinner table one night, and his name was Edward. He says, hey guys, guess what? Like, this is Jinja, Uganda. The source of the Nile is right in our community. You have to go rafting while you're here. So most of us thought that was a good thing, right? Like, let's go rafting while we're here in Uganda. It'll be fun. But we had one team member who didn't want to go at all. This team member was like, no way, man, I'm not going rafting. We could die here, and I want to go home and see my family. And so because we're really good friends, we cared for him and nurtured him, and we tried to convince, okay, we didn't do any of that. We mocked him so much that he finally gave in and said, okay, I'll go, because we made a decision. It's all of us or it's none of us. And I remember when we went down to the Nile, and you could see the rapids right in front of you, and we met our guide, Tutu. And our guide, Tutu, is just this crazy wild man, right? He's like, okay, guys, jump in the river, and we're going to go through a training before we start paddling to hit the rapids. And I thought, this is good. I need training because I don't want to die either, right? So we jump in the river, and he gets on the raft, and he says this. He goes, okay, this is what you need to know. If we flip, don't worry. The river will spit you out. Get in the boat. Let's start paddling. And I'm like, that's all I get? Surely I'm going to die in this river. Now, I wish I would have listened to my other friend who didn't want to go. And I remember the first thing, we hit this class 3 rapid, and it was fun. And then we hit this class 5, but it was a quick class 5, and that was a blast. And then up ahead, we saw the monster rapid. It was like, oh my gosh, we cannot go down that, right? And then Tutu says, are you guys nervous? And we're like, no, of course we're not nervous. This is no big deal. Good, because we're not going to go down those rapids. That's a class 6, and it's illegal. And so we actually had to go to the bank and get out and take our raft around the class 6, put it back in the class 5 rapid, which is right after the class 6. And so Tutu then says, okay, let's start paddling. But you have 3 options. You have the easy, the medium, and the hard. What option do you want to take? And we're like, we can't say easy because that just doesn't seem very brave. We definitely don't want to say hard because we're not that brave. So we said, let's go down the medium. But we pointed. And we didn't realize at the time when we pointed to the hard part of the rapids. And so he says, okay, here we go. Get ready to flip. And we did. And of course, we're in Uganda, and we're in this little touristy area, and they're taking pictures of the whole thing, so now I have a story. I remember flipping, and I felt immediately being pounded by the weight of the water, just being crushed by the Nile River. It was unbelievably horrible. I felt as if I was in a washing machine just getting shaken back and forth. I immediately sunk down to the bottom, and I was just hoping that Tutu was right and that we would eventually come out of the river. And guess what? 125 yards later, in about 20 to 30 seconds, I finally was spit out of the river. It was the most important breath of air I've ever taken in my entire life. Luckily, my friend was right next to me, and he had an oar, and he handed me, and he pulled me in. A safety boat came in, and they pulled me into the safety boat, and of course, the first person I saw was my friend who didn't want to go. And I'm like, bro, that was amazing. He's like, no, it wasn't. We almost died. What are you talking about? And I'm like, well, now you have a story to tell. Let's just say he wasn't happy with me, and I say that story just to say this. Over 1.4 billion people are being crushed by the weight of extreme poverty. There's got to be ways for you and I to make a difference in their lives. If we do creative fundraising, if we unleash our human capital, and if we partner with high-capacity local leaders, I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that we can go from 26% of those suffering from extreme poverty to 0 in our lifetime. I believe it. I hope you do too. Thank you, and God bless.